But today I'm so honored to be able to have our executive director and I should say our chief executive officer and our chief operating officer, Justin Owen and Jackie Casey. Thank you for being here today. They really don't need any introduction, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about them anyhow. Justin was in the class of 70 and has been our CEO for 4 years now. He previously was the executive director of another nonprofit and came from a corporate background at Disney. Justin has been instrumental in guiding the Conservancy into a new level of science, education, and stewardship. Under his leadership, we have significantly increased the number of people we impact, the number of children we educate, and the regional exposure that exists today. And thank you for that. Jackie Casey, boy, I've known Jackie from the trails, she was a Pathfinder with me. She's from the class of 65. She's been our chief operating officer for 2 years. While she was a steward, Jackie was involved in helping to implement the Stewardship 2020 recommendations. And prior to that, she was in corporate life with the majority of her time spent in banking at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Her primary focus for the Conservancy is to ensure that both our programs and business operate in the most efficient way possible. In other words, she doesn't want me to spend too much on speakers. No, I'm kidding. Well, thank you both very much, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. So I'll leave it up to Justin and Jackie. I don't know who's going to go first, but you'll be able to tell us. Are you going to spotlight them?
As soon as I find out who it is.
Well, right now it's going to be me, but Jackie will be our technical one, sharing the PowerPoint.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, are we ready to rock and roll, Jackie?
I think so, if you guys are seeing that presentation.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, Steve said it was fun when he reached out to me and Jackie about, can we get a bio? It's like, what can we write about ourselves that maybe people don't know, because I'd like to think a lot of people know who I am. But I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. You'll see some of our staff members on here. Thank you for joining as well. CLT members and stewards as a whole, thank you for joining us. I know sometimes the strategic side isn't as much fun, but we're here to tell you why it is the most fun for our 30-year-old organization. So in the last 30 years, we've done a really good job at identifying what we need to work on today and possibly tomorrow, but where we've really needed a focus is, what do we want to be when we grow up? We always know we've wanted to advocate for the preserve, we've wanted to advocate for natural open space, and we've wanted to take care of this amazing, beautiful resource that we all love and adore. Well, as the organization continued to grow and continued to grow, it was tasked with finding out, again, who do we want to be when we grow up? What is our big goal? I mean, some people know the hairy, audacious goals from their corporate world. We're not that out there, but also we want to look at who we are. And for those of you that aren't as familiar with nonprofit structures, a lot of the times with nonprofit structures, people say, okay, you're the organization's leader. Where are we going? What are we doing? Thinking in a corporate mindset where it's singularly led. With nonprofit structures being public companies that have no ownership, that resides on our board of directors. Our board is responsible for defining what is that big mission, what are those big goals. So one of their responsibilities, as required not just by best practices, but by the state and the IRS, is really to work on who do we want to be sustainable. So through the process of strategic planning over the last probably 10 years, when we had a really good grasp on starting strategic planning, our strategic plan's always focused on how do we get through this year. So it's how do we get as many stewards on the trails this year? How do we fundraise enough money to make sure the organization is taken care of this year? And I'm really excited to say over the last year, the board, the staff, and the stewards have worked on developing our new strategic plan that looks at who do we want to be in 1 year, who do we want to be in 3 years, and who do we want to be in 5 years? And some people ask, when we look at 1 and 3, a lot of those plan our programmatic and our business plan, where do those 5-year goals really sit? Because we're not typically looking that far out. Why we do our first year goals is really to assign and divide what we want to do as an organization right now, what we need to do. Our 3 years are how we're going to build out the resources to do it. And our 5 years are those big, amazing goals that we want to accomplish, that in 3 years, when we look at this plan again, we can say, is that still something that's a little ways out? Maybe not something we want to take on right away? Or is that something that we've really been able to advance now? So sort of as a preface, when we go into this strategic plan, it's not who do we want to be in 10, 20, 30 years, but it's also defining who do we want to be based on what we are today, where we're going, and then what are some really big things we want to accomplish. Another thing to note in strategic planning, and Jackie may yell at me if I'm advancing before, but if we want to jump to the next slide, when we're looking at a strategic planning process, dun, 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 there we go. A lot of the times when we break down what is the strategic plan, we're going to start with, as I said, who do we want to be in the future? That's really our vision, our mission, that's living up at that 50,000 foot level. When we get down into the strategy of how do we want to do that at that 40,000 foot level, that's where we're going to look at our goals and objectives as we see them in our presentation to see what are those overarching things. And then, as I said, in the objective point of view, we've got this 40,000 foot goal. What are those 30,000 foot pieces that put it together? Then when we move down into, and we won't go into the nitty gritty today, into strategies and tactics, but when we dive a little bit deeper into what this graphic calls our critical success factors, those really help define what are our annual plans. When we've got, whether it's a program, so Pathfinders, what are your strategies going to be to really accomplish those? Science, education, stewardship, when we look at those, what are our goals that we're going to measure ourselves against this year? And then when you get into the tactics, really what is going to be our key action initiatives, those are the day-to-day things. What am I going to do every day? What is a Pathfinder going to do every day to make it happen? And then you'll see that one in there, KPIs, our key performance indicators. We take a lot of that mesh. So one thing we haven't shared is the 20 some odd page tactical roadmap on how we're going to accomplish this, because it reads like an encyclopedia. So if you ever want to join us and read it, feel free. But we've built out key performance indicators, which group those tactics together to say, if a program, if a steward initiative, if a scientific research project wants to accomplish these 5 to 10 tactics, what is our one indicator that shows that we're on track to do that? So those are key performance indicators in how we do it. So as we've worked through how we built out the strategic plan, one very important note to it is a strategic plan isn't specifically designed to say, you're doing this stuff and really amazing, let's continue to do that. It's really to identify areas where you need to focus growth and resources. So I say that because as we move through a strategic planning process, as we move through things, one thing that I ask everyone to remember is because something is included in the strategic plan, that does not by default mean something else is excluded. So if we've got great scientific research projects that are happening and we don't mention them individually in the strategic plan, that doesn't mean we're not going to do them. That means the ones that are in the strategic plan are strategic areas of focus. And when we identify communities and stakeholders that we need to work with, those are specifically because we need to focus extra energy there. It doesn't mean we're going to stop focusing our other resources to areas we normally serve. The greatest example that we'll use when Jackie goes through all of the parts of the strategic plan is, as we've seen on a local, regional, state, and even national topic, being able to provide the importance of STEAM education, being able to provide science-based education in underrepresented communities is an area of focus in our strategic plan. But as I said, as we identify areas of focus, that does not automatically mean areas of exclusion. It doesn't mean that we will stop serving our Scottsdale area. So it does not mean we'll stop serving the preserve. We will continue those programs because we do them so well, but this plan identifies areas where we need to move and make stronger focus. On the next slide, we'll walk through how we got to the process, because it's one of the questions people always say. Did you sit in the back room with 5 people and write all these down? And I'd like to say no, and that's true. We started the process a year ago. So the board adopted the strategic plan at its May meeting. The process for planning this started in July of last year. And the first start of the process was stakeholder interviews. We interviewed over 20 different individuals and organizations on, as our stakeholders, how do you think we're doing? What do you think we're doing great? What do you think we could do better? And what are some areas where we're not doing anything where you can identify a need? We talked to our partners in the city staff and our elected officials around the city, as well as our partner organizations. So our friends over at Maricopa County that manage the regional park, our friends at the Tonto National Forest, where do you see a need for us? We took a group of our CLT leaders. I see some of the folks that we interviewed on this call today, so thank you for joining us. We also took a group of our donors, and then as well our staff and our board members. So we did a wide-reaching net through our stakeholders to see what are the different pieces that we need to incorporate in this. It also included a full-day board retreat where our board met for a day and went through all of the ideas that came out of our stakeholder interviews. As well, we engaged with a consulting firm that specifically works on nonprofit strategic plans to facilitate the retreat, to do the interviews, as well as collate the data. Once the board and the executive team got to an agreement on, we love what the stakeholders have provided, this seems to align wonderfully with what we're doing, we brought it back to the individual teams. So Jackie, I know, worked with each of the programs as well as the core leadership team to go through the ideas on these programs. And we had 3 staff retreats as well with our internal staff and partners on how can we refine these? Because the last thing we want to do is set any goals or objectives we can't accomplish. The last thing we want to do is say, here's some great things we want to do, but we don't have the resources to do it. Then eventually going through the board approval process, as we said, it was originally to present it to the board in March for a first round. Then it went back to the governance and strategic planning committee for revisions in April, and then adoption in May. From this point forward, we've got 2 additional steps, and a lot of people are familiar with the tracking and reporting. As Jackie works with the core leadership team and the staff on, here are those tactics, strategies, objectives, and goals. We not only need to track our progress against them, but also report our progress against them, because as the board's responsibility to make sure that we're fulfilling the strategic plan, we have to report on that. But one area that often gets forgotten is the review and revise. So we know no one anticipated COVID. No one anticipated a lot of things that come up in our life. So it's very important to recognize when we have to revise what's going to happen. Sometimes it's an organizational need, sometimes it's a business need. Sometimes, and this happens, we'll see it, we're announcing it next week, that we have a funder that steps up and provides us a large amount of funding to advance a program that wasn't on our radar for 3 to 5 years, but now we can do it this year. So we're always looking at how can we review it to make sure that we're standing by it, but then revising it as need be. When we move through the process, there are going to be a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. If anyone ever has any questions, where does this fit? How does this fit? I always encourage people to reach out to me or Jack. Both of us would love to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation, because when you take probably about 400 hours of work and probably over 100 pages of data and try and shrink it down to the 3 pages that will be on Steward World, it leaves a lot for interpretation. So we've got a lot of that data. I joke that Jackie's probably forgotten more about the strategic plan than I know. So with all of the data that we've worked in this, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Feel free to talk to us. As we go through these individual areas, if you have questions, if you want to put them in the chat, or if you want to wait till the end, we have put time at the end for a question and answer portion where Jackie and I will be happy to answer any questions that come up. But right now, I'm going to shift it over to my amazing colleague, Jackie Casey, to walk you through the initiatives, goals, and objectives of our 5-year strategic plan.
Thank you. So as Justin said, we will be sharing, there is a very simplified document that has this information. So you will be pleased to hear I am not planning on reading through all of this, but I really want to kind of use it as a chance to give an overview of the types of things that we will be doing. And then one question I want to address just before we go to questions, how do stewards get involved in this? Because you guys all know you're the lifeblood of this. You are the lifeblood of this organization. We couldn't have created the strategic plan without you. We couldn't do what we do every day without you. And we couldn't deliver on this strategic plan without you. So we want to very much make sure that it's a partnership as we move into delivery mode. So there are 4 tabs that I'm going to go through. We obviously have 3 pillars of science, education, and stewardship. As part of creating the strategic plan, the board came up with a 4th area, which has been grouped under sustainability. It is not a new pillar. It's just a nice way of pulling together the other pieces which are required to ensure that we remain a sustainable organization. So that's why you're going to see kind of 3 pages of this rather than our normal 3 pillars. So the first one, science, advanced research and conservation work with stakeholders to protect the Sonoran Desert and other semi-arid environments. Within each of 3 of the 4 areas, there are going to be 4 goals, and each of them have 3 sub goals underneath it. Sustainability, we actually get to 5 goals. But if we just look at goal 1, so make research accessible to scientific institutions and citizen science communities. We do the most amazing scientific work. We do a huge amount of it thanks to the staff and the stewards. It's really important that we share that work. There is so much to be studied. There is so much to be looked at. If we can help partner with others so that they can leverage their data, our data, they can leverage their findings, we can leverage their data, we can leverage their findings. Working together is going to be the most effective way of ensuring that we can all have a greater impact. So just one example of the type of things that we're going to be doing here. We are delighted when we get published. It is a major kudos to the organization. And for anyone that's been involved in any of these publications, they realize how much work is involved and how important it is. There's multiple ways you can publish. The most expensive way is that you publish to open source, which means it isn't just academics that are finding this information. People who, like citizen scientists who have a general interest, can find that information. So those are the type of routes that we're going to be taking. More cost to us, but it means that our data, our results, our findings, and our recommendations are more broadly available to scientific communities and to citizen scientists. We're also here looking at where we can put our data. So you'll all know that Dr. Peter Schlosser is on our board, and in some of these strategic planning discussions, we had some great discussions with him, which is people want access to our data. Other scientists want access to our data. They don't just want access to our findings and our recommendations. They want to be able to leverage the data from us and other organizations. So it's trying to figure out what are the right places to place our data so that it is accessible for people. And then the last one on goal 1 is really collaborating with our other entities. We have done a ton of work over the last year or 2 with CASCA and with a bunch of other organizations. As I said earlier, we can have a much, much greater impact by partnering with other organizations. So it's really figuring out how can we make the best collaborations possible so that we are sharing findings, we're sharing research, and we're able to study more together. If I look at goal 2 here, make research understandable and accessible to the general community from children to adult learners. So this is really about, some people are frightened by science. If they see a scientific publication, it's not something that they're likely to pick up. but something we had implemented for education a year or so ago. At the end of every lecture, we left people with, here's the one thing that you can do that would make a difference. So it's really adopting that approach more broadly so that people can understand it isn't just scientific and academic interest in this. We all have a role to play. So these goals under here really are designed to make sure we identify who the audiences are, making sure the materials are written in such a way that they can understand them, and make it personal and relatable. Every person can play a role in this, and if we all do a little bit, it makes a significant difference. Number 3 is maximizing our impact by planning and conducting research internally and through collaborative efforts with scientific and other organizations. So I talked a little about this under goal 1, but it really is figuring out how can the group of organizations who are interested and involved in this, how can we best work together to have the greatest impact? As I said, we've done some amazing work on this, but there is much, much more that can be done. And then goal 4 for science is include elements of climate change and other environmental impacts in our research projects. I think anyone who's involved in non-native plants or who saw Steve's picture behind him saw the last 2 years. We thought non-native plants were kind of somewhat getting under control, but with the amount of rain that we've seen recently, everything has got very, very green. So what is there that we need to do to make sure that climate change, the impact of things like that are front of people's mind? So it's something we already do factor through our work, but how can we make sure that we're pulling out those key themes so that people truly understand why it is so important? Moving on to education, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions, so it's probably easier at the end, but if anyone does want to interrupt, then just feel free. So obviously we have done a ton of work around education over the last 1.5 to 2 years. We had an education strategy committee that came up with one of their primary recommendations was that we needed to hire professional education people, which we have done. Those, along with some amazing stewards, has really helped us figure out what we should be doing with education and making sure that we have it, or we move towards a cohesive curriculum that has multiple entry points, the focus that everything is connected and continually changing. So the first one here is integrate our unique research and steward organization into our educational priorities. So we have a lot of research data, but how can we actually get people to use that in their learning? And again, one of Peter Schlosser's things here was he would love his students to be able to get hold of the raw data, to come into the field with us so they really get these hands-on learning experiences. And he said that is the way that people that he is working with now tend to learn. And another example is we are just doing some work with Scottsdale Unified School District. There is going to be a cohort of teachers working with Nicole and Mary, and they are going to come up with a new program for their classes. And again, it uses our direct scientific data that we've pulled. How do we convert that into a learning experience for, in that case, it's for students. But this is really looking to make sure it's across all generations. Talking about youth education is really important for goal 2. So most of you will remember Junior Citizen Science Festival, which has been going on longer than I've been around. And I think Melanie was probably instrumental in creating it. It's always been an amazing experience for kids, but it's actually really hard for teachers because it takes them a day away from their teaching. So the kids get a great field trip, but the teachers have to make up that time elsewhere with them. So when Nicole joined us, she redesigned expedition days so it directly delivers the new educational curriculum. So it isn't a day out for the teachers, it's actually a day off for them because we deliver the curriculum. So this one is really very much about making sure that our youth education directly delivers curriculum. And the second one, talking about collaboration with school districts, what we're already learning is that their needs are very different. Mesa Public School District has got very involved in helping us build out the new expedition days online that we launched last year. New curriculum was launched. Arizona decided not to go down the national standards route, so that the school districts couldn't buy things off the shelf. They're having to design it. So Mesa needed help with that. Scottsdale Unified is in a different position. Their school district had already created it. So what they're looking for is kind of more bolt-on options and more experiential learning. So it's working with these different groups to make sure that we can offer something to different school districts and really kind of have that impact. Number 3, I will preface with saying this one needs funding before we can get very far. So I think COVID has taught all of us, as this is an example, that we've moved very much to virtual learning, but there are some amazing opportunities out there. So first of all, the simple ones are we want to get more people using platforms that are already there. So there are free apps on phones like eBird, iNaturalist, these kind of things. If we can get more people using them, we're collecting data, people are educating themselves. And then the second 2 is where the money really comes in. So just by way of an example, through this process, a board member introduced us to a company in California that does virtual reality. So they showed us they have built a library where people of various ages can go into it. You explore different rooms. We could actually build effectively a virtual school. So 4th grade could go into the 4th grade classroom and learn different things that way. There could be kind of break rooms, which was cross grades. So there are ways that we can deliver both augmented reality and virtual reality educational opportunities, which are so impactful. They are so expensive. So we will continue searching to see whether we can find a funder for some of those kind of things. But to the extent we can get funding, then we will kick some of those off. The last one is engage underrepresented communities to provide an opportunity to everyone to become environmental stewards. Justin touched on this by saying we're not looking to exclude anyone, but we do know there is a lot of research that shows us that if you give underrepresented and Title I children opportunities at the right stage in their learning, it gives them a real opportunity of a pathway out of poverty. So this is going to be a huge piece for us. It's like, again, how can we have a really positive impact on those people? The first thing we need to do is we need to understand how and what they want. Up until now, we do lectures, which are amazing. We do hikes, we do this kind of stuff. But if that isn't accessible to some of these communities, let's start talking to them and figure out what it is that they want and then how we can meet those needs. And then create internships to train future conservationists. Again, this is a key passion of Melanie's. Can we give those kids an opportunity to come work alongside us so that they can truly understand what a career in conservation could look like, and is it something that's appealing? So giving them some real live experiences. I am going to move on to stewardship. So maintain and protect natural open spaces for future generations and engage communities to become environmental stewards. So first of all, is position the Conservancy as a significant community institution that advances and supports natural open spaces. Ever since I've been a steward, there's always been this kind of difficulty of people understanding who the Conservancy are and what the preserve is. So it's really trying to make sure that people understand who the Conservancy is and the impact that we have, so that then we can garner support for the Conservancy as separation from support for the preserve. The preserve is and always will be a massive part of what we do, but it isn't everything that we do. So this one involves building a community engagement plan. And again, let's just understand what different groups want. How do we best interact with them? We've done some work already on a limited basis about supporting other conservancies. Paul Staker helped White Tanks kind of create a conservancy. REI have just reached out to us and asked us if we'll be part of a virtual forum. They're very impressed with our steward organization and the amount we managed to achieve because of the stewards. So they want us to help others learn how they can do that as well. So again, it's how can we have a bigger impact by helping others learn and benefit from our successes. Empower the next generation of environmental stewards. So creating a plan for engaging stakeholders. The next one talks about the volunteer program. So we have clearly a very, very well-established steward program, but there are many people who don't have the time and the resources to commit to being a steward. They will be much more interested in episodic volunteering opportunities. So we've talked about it for a number of years. Do we create a separate volunteer organization so that when we have our major events like expedition days and some of these others, we have this other pool of people that we start to get engaged, and then maybe when they get to retirement, maybe when they get more time, they will feel that they're able to become stewards. But it's really just trying to give more people insight into what they can do and how they can have this positive impact. Goal 3, leverage our exemplary steward program to ensure safe, knowledgeable and respectful public use or public action to natural open spaces. The preserve has seen an almost doubling in the number of visitors over the last year. Gyms were closed. I think many of us needed natural open space for mental health benefits. So there are more and more users, and there are probably more and more users who are not used to being out there, and therefore how we respect the land. So it's really trying to figure out how can we get the message to these people. So use the preserve to help teach these messages and to help advocate for natural open spaces. Leverage our largest asset, which is the stewards. I mean, I think all of you know that's where I came from, and I am still so impressed from day one and to this day in terms of how much we managed to achieve as a steward organization. So let's continue to make sure we're maximizing the impact there. And then looking at a fee-for-service model, which is something we've talked about for some time. All of our lectures, field studies, everything is free right now. Should we create a kind of multi-tiered model where lectures and entry-level hikes remain free? We have the expertise and the skills and the talent to do workshop levels for those that do want to go and learn. Is that something that we should consider for a fee? When we talk about helping other conservancies in terms of setting up their own conservancy or the best way to use volunteers, are there some areas there where we've built this expertise that at the moment, to some extent, we give away free and to some extent we don't leverage as much as we could? Are there opportunities for us there? And then the last one under stewardship is strive towards best-in-class status in urban preserve management. And this is very, very much focused on the preserve. So as I said, the preserve will always be a huge part of what we do. So really just making sure that people can distinguish between the conservancy and the preserve, making sure that we continue to be that amazing partner to the City of Scottsdale, making sure that we have joint priorities with the City of Scottsdale. So it may well be something that we're passionate about, but if it's not a city priority, should we work together to create those priorities so that we're all working in the same way? And the last one, just making sure that that city partnership remains very strong. Justin and I meet with them every single week. I know many of you interact with them as well. I know we are fortunate that we have a good number of stewards who are and have been preserve commissioners. So it feels like there is that linkage remains really, really strong. And it's really just making sure that it does remain that strong. Last one before I take a drink and I give people a chance to ask questions. So sustainability, and this is very much kind of the catch-all, and you'll see there are a number of different topics within here. So improve the Conservancy's infrastructure, governance capacity and financial strength to support organisational goals. The first one is about embracing a diverse and inclusive environment that represents our greater community. Some of the earlier pieces I've talked about is like, we don't know what some communities want from the Conservancy and what we have to offer them. Wouldn't it be great if we had an organisation, and this is between board, staff, stewards and the volunteer programme, that really well represents the community? So we're not guessing what different groups want. We have them at the table and able to tell us what they want. There are plenty of other organisations around who probably are further in terms of diversity and inclusion. So are there groups that we can partner with to help us on our journey? And then developing a communication model for how we communicate with different groups. Again, we've kind of focused on the people that we know and the people that are supporters. Are there different ways we need to communicate with people? Is it different forums? If it's not lectures? There are plenty of different options, and we just want to make sure that we really explore those and figure out the best possible way to engage as broad a community group as possible. Goal 2 isn't a surprise, it's financial stability. Obviously, you know, the last year was very, very tough for many non-profits. Justin kind of teed it up just now. We were extremely lucky with a very significant donor. But even despite that, we, and every one of you thanked us, we reined in, every one of you helped us, we really reined in our expenses, and we actually ended up in a very, very good financial position at the end of the year. But 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, none of us could probably predict what COVID would be like. So we know the world keeps changing. So it's just making sure that we build a really strong financial platform, which then can adapt as things change. Goal 3 is around the staff. We have, I think all of you know, as times got tough, we shrunk our staff. We didn't shrink what we did as staff. So we have put an awful lot of pressure on the staff to continue to deliver more and more. And we thank them for kind of getting us through this. But now's the time to figure out, the board has set us a pretty ambitious strategic plan to deliver, and part of the discussion with them was that we need to bring certain specialists in to help us on staff to help us deliver these things. So that's what we're looking at right now, is making sure that we have the right people with the right skills, they are recognized and rewarded in the right way. We're investing in their professional development, and we're also having an engagement plan. So it's clear every one of our staff is very passionate about what we do. But as Steve mentioned at the beginning, I came from a corporate background, and I'm not sure that nonprofit work isn't even tougher. It's important that people are engaged in what we do and that they see the opportunities and the growth, and we would all be a lot happier if we had a stable and long-term staff. So that is why it ranks as highly as becoming on our strategic plan. Number 4 is around the board of directors. So again, it's just trying to help figure out how can they be the most effective board possible. We've seen a shift on the board. It used to be largely retired people on our board. Now we have a very active, and more than half of them work full time, which obviously brings different dynamics. One, they have great connections, they have great ideas, they have less time. So this is really about how do we find the right people to join the board, and how do we make sure we're leveraging them in the best possible way. And then the last one I think I've pretty much covered already. So maintain a strong working relationship with the city of Scottsdale and its stakeholders so that people realize what we do. I think our relationship with our direct Croy Scott and his Merry team is really, really strong. Justin has made amazing inroads into other groups. So Scottsdale Fire Department, Scottsdale Police Department, some of the city councillors, but it's really trying to make sure that it's not just our normal crew that know who we are and what we do. It's broadly recognised throughout the city of Scottsdale what we do. Oh my God, that was a whistle-stop tour. So that was everything I had to share with you. I think probably next it makes sense, Steve, to open up to questions, but I will just say, one, this will be posted on Steward World. And second of all, the question I said I would address at the beginning, how do stewards get involved? So this strategic plan was written alongside stewards. They have stress tested it along the way, and we couldn't deliver it without the stewards. So there will be a CLT retreat next month, when the CLT will be tackling 5 items from the strategic plan. There's going to be breakout groups and brainstorming to kind of come up with a plan for how we can do those. And then at the end of that, we'll be assessing, is that effective? Is it an effective way to do? Because we didn't have a huge amount of time before this, Rick and I went through the strategic plan and identified which 5 we thought it made most sense for them to start with. And then if it does prove to be successful, we will be looking to hold the retreats twice per year and tackle different pieces of the strategic plan. And once the CLT retreat is over, we're going to ask one person from each of the groups to continue on the team, but then we're going to specifically ask them to recruit other stewards to be part of the delivery team for it, so that there will be an opportunity for all stewards to get involved in any items that they feel passionate about. So I know I've said it already, but there's no way we can deliver this without you guys. So we look forward to sharing more after the CLT retreat.
Well, thank you so very much, Jackie and Justin. I do have a few questions that have come in. One that I think you've already answered about the strategic plan being available to stewards, and you said that's going to be on Steward World, correct?
Correct. There's a summary page which has as much details as I've just shared with you. We will get that up on Steward World in the next few days.
So you were talking a little bit about, I was curious about this, maximizing steward impact. And I see there's a lot of educational initiatives directed outward. And I wanted to know, how is the educational program gearing up to help our existing conservancy programs like guided hike and bikes or Pathfinder Patrol, nature guides? And we just can't do it on a lunch and learn basis. Is there anything specific in the strategic plan that we want to direct for educational purposes to help us deliver the education to the public?
There is lots. I was just looking to see whether Nicole was on or not, because she can talk to this way better than I can, but there is lots. So the education implementation committee kind of really looked at education more broadly, and now they have kind of launched their offerings, but they are doing, they have a bunch of projects going at the moment. One is the inventory project. So they have been inventorying every single educational offering we have, from the obvious Mustang lecture series through to the guided hike and bike. They will then be creating that into what it looks like as a curriculum. And the aim is that it can be jumped into at any point. So if someone comes into it, and this is whether it's a steward or whether it's a member of the public who has a passion in geology, they can join those sessions. But because our offerings going forward are going to be very much connected, through that, it will give you a leaping point off to different offerings, which may start with geology, but it can take you to different places. So all of our offerings, I mean, we took a decision a while back that our education offerings were so strong, we shouldn't just hold them for stewards. We wanted to offer them to the public. And I think it's really important that we encourage as many stewards as possible to attend our educational offerings. Next to me on the screen, I see it's Marsha. And I know Marsha spent many, many years trying to encourage as many stewards as we possibly can to go through those programs. There is a huge variety of them. The content is amazing. So these all provide an opportunity for us to learn more, and that then gives us an opportunity to share more with the public.
Very nice. Very good. Good answer. You talked a little bit also about some fee-based. I know Justin has a couple more comments yet, but I have one more question about fee-based projects. Do they typically involve a tremendous amount of income for the Conservancy, or is this just a way of inroads into other areas?
It's not something we've done so far, so it's something we want to explore. So if I go back to kind of the education example, could we get to a point where our Mustang lecture series remains free, our base level hikes that accompany them remain free? Is there additional level there which is for a small fee? And then is there a much more specialist workshop for those that are really interested that will be for a greater fee? So that's something we want to explore. We know there's a lot of organizations out there, Conservancy and other non-profits, who kind of love the idea of using volunteers, but it's kind of tough to get started. We've been through a lot of that stuff. So can we help those organizations? We do it at the moment for free, but is it something that we could do for a fee for service, not to try and make money from other nonprofits, but it's other organizations as well. Are there grants that we can apply for that helps us set up other nonprofit organizations so that they have the strength that our steward organization gives us?
Do we have someone who specifically writes grants for us, or?
We do. We have a consultant grant writer, and she is a specialist in writing conservation grants. So this is not an area that she has looked at this stage. I don't have what years we're planning on delivering each of these items in at this stage. It certainly isn't a year one piece of it, but I know it's been something that Dan Gruber's been talking about for a long time, and he calls it a conservancy in a box. It's just like, we have this amazing organization that we spent a long time developing, fine tuning. We've been through that journey. So is there a way that we can help others in an effective way to kind of shortcut getting to where we are right now?
I know it's a special technique in writing these grants, so that's why I was curious.
Yes.
Justin, you have a few points.
Yeah, a couple quick things. So Jackie hit the nail on the head right there. I know as I look at everybody on the screen, you all have had wonderful careers in business. And what do we know is the best way to make sure a business is sustainable? Diversified revenue streams. So one of the things when I came in 4 years ago, that was our biggest challenge was we were 98% supported by individual contributions. And as a nonprofit, that is a really, really scary place to be at, because if something happens, there's a shift. So we've diversified those, and that's when we're looking at our fee-for-service programs. It's really not that it would be a primary revenue source at this point in time, but it would help us be more sustainable and more stable in the long term. As we saw with COVID, when our foundation and corporate funding reduced, if we'd had other diversified revenue streams, it's really, really helpful. So that one that Jackie's talking about the fee-for-service model in education and research, I'll give everyone the easiest example. Our big sister organization in the Grand Canyon Conservancy, they're lucky enough to have about 3 volunteers. You heard me right, about 3. We have 700, and the reason they have so few is because it's really, really expensive to live in Grand Canyon Village. So their entire field institute is staffed by tourists. Not that we are going in an ecotourism model, I will clarify that. We are not headed there, but the entire reason their field institute exists is because their fee-for-service model is tourists come and pay to be citizen scientists for a day, or pay to be citizen scientists for a week. So we are very, very fortunate down here that we have such a vibrant and strong steward base that we didn't experience what they experienced during COVID. For those of you that are connected with Grand Canyon Conservancy, their field institute shut down about 9 months ago. And it was because tourism stopped and they didn't have anyone to do the research and citizen science anymore. The hope is to relaunch it when it comes back. But that's really when we're looking at the fee-for-service models, is just how can we help diversify who we are as a business? The other thing I wanted to quickly clarify was I am the first one to say, if I mess up, I want to let people I mess up. I said a quote at the beginning of Jackie's speech that I want to rephrase, that one of our board members jokes that Jackie and I have probably forgotten more about the strategic plan than most people know, not than I know. So I wanted to clarify that because Steve's got the little recording light blinking in the corner. And then the other thing that I wanted to throw out there as well, both Jackie and I referred a couple of times to this person named Melanie. And those of you that are involved in our scientific work may know this. You may all know this because I love our entire organization, but sometimes we leak like a sieve. Because of this big funding project that came in about a month and a half ago, we were able to recognize a lot of our goals and achieve them. So you'll see over the coming weeks and months, our staff's going to grow, and it's going to grow substantially because this gift we pursued was not a general support gift. It wasn't just help us continue to do what we're doing. It's help us move the organization into the future. So that name Melanie that you all recognize and you see her face on here, you're like, I swear I know her. She was with us 5 years ago, and you'll see the release next week. We're still in hush hush, even though we're a bit Swiss cheese. That until the announcement goes out next week for the funding, you all will hear in next Thursday's email the new team members that are joining, but I'm very happy that Melanie joined us 2 days ago, and she's already been in meetings, I think, since she started. But just so people weren't going, why does Jackie and Justin keep saying Melanie? So I wanted to clarify on that. But I'd be happy if anyone else has any other questions. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but like I said, you can always email me or Jackie. We're happy to jump on a Zoom, happy to jump on the phone. I know if we can socially distance, I'm happy to grab coffee or something. So any other questions, Steve?
I'll open it up to the floor if anybody has any questions. If not, Justin, you don't have to worry about it. Art edits all these recordings. So if you
Oh,
need
so
to,
you can add more hair up here.
Art cannot, I can.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And hopefully, like Jackie said, we'll hear from Melanie in one of our lunch and learns down the road. I think her strength is in science and education, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm looking forward to that, as well as the other programs that we have listed on Better Impact. They're all programmed through the end of December. We have some amazing speakers. We're so fortunate to have Scott Hamilton coming back for the second Trails, the prequel to his previous Trails. John Lillette will give us a hint, and with the help of some of the people who created the new phrase field interpretive track, Bernie Finkel, and I've actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, Maxine contacted Jacques Girard to come in the beginning of the year. So one of our favorite professors and friends of the Conservancy. So we're reaching out. If anybody has any ideas, please let me know that some of the stuff you might want to hear or see. And I'm certainly welcome to any suggestions. I want to again thank everybody today, and a great presentation from Justin and from Jackie. It's wonderful to hear the background, and I know everyone is so thrilled to have such structure and know what we're all volunteering and working hard for to do. Again, thank you all very much, and I'll see you the 23rd for the slow skis, but and then I'll see you the 25th at Gateway. Have a great weekend, have a great weekend.